We've all had that moment, that split second where your heart drops into your stomach, when you realize you've made a devastating mistake. But for Michael Bennett, that moment didn't come until 6 hours too late. Have you ever wondered how quickly your life can change? How one decision, one distraction, can alter everything? Let's find out. Michael Bennett was, by all accounts, an ordinary man, a 34-year-old programmer who had been thrust into single fatherhood when his wife Diana died during childbirth 3 years ago. Their daughter, Emma, was the center of his world, a bright-eyed toddler with her mother's smile and an infectious laugh. But Michael was also exhausted. Balancing a demanding job with solo parenting had worn him to the bone. His life had become a carefully choreographed routine. Wake up, get Emma ready for daycare, drop her off, work, pick her up, dinner, bedtime, repeat. Friends had noticed the dark circles under his eyes growing deeper. His mother called twice a week, offering to move closer to help. But Michael had always been stubbornly independent, determined to prove he could handle everything on his own. That Tuesday morning in July started like any other. The alarm blaring at 6:30 a.m., Emma fussing over breakfast, the rushed routine of getting her dressed, packing her lunch, loading her into the car seat of his sedan. But this morning was different in one crucial way. Michael had a 9 a.m. presentation that could determine whether his team's project would receive continued funding. He'd been up until 3 a.m. finalizing slides, rehearsing his talking points, anticipating questions. His phone rang as he was backing out of the driveway. His boss, asking if he could join a pre-meeting call in 15 minutes. "Of course," Michael said, switching the call to his Bluetooth as he merged onto the highway. The pre-meeting call was chaotic. The lead investor had concerns about the timeline. A key component might need to be redesigned. Michael's mind raced, calculating adjustments, considering alternatives, all while navigating morning traffic. "I need you to take the lead on this, Bennett," his boss said. "This is your chance to shine." When Michael pulled into the office parking garage at 8:45, his mind was entirely consumed by the presentation ahead. He grabbed his laptop bag, locked the car, and hurried toward the elevator. Emma, who had fallen asleep during the drive, remained silently strapped in her car seat. The presentation went brilliantly. Michael addressed concerns, pivoted when necessary, showcased the project's potential. By noon, they had secured the funding. His colleagues slapped his back in congratulation. His boss pulled him aside and mentioned a potential promotion. It was during the celebratory lunch that Michael's phone battery died. He borrowed a charger from a coworker, but left the phone on his desk while the team went out. And as the afternoon sun climbed higher, turning his parked car into an oven, Michael sat in an air-conditioned restaurant, accepting praise, completely unaware that the clock was ticking for the person he loved most in the world. At 3:15 p.m., Michael's phone finally had enough charge to turn back on. Immediately, it began buzzing with notifications. 5 missed calls from Emma's daycare, 3 voicemails, 7 text messages. His blood ran cold as he played the first voicemail, dated 9:30 a.m. "Mr. Bennett, this is Miss Carol from Sunshine Daycare. Emma hasn't been dropped off yet, and we haven't heard from you. Please give us a call to let us know if she'll be absent today." The second, from 11:45 a.m. "Mr. Bennett, we're getting concerned. This isn't like you. Please call us back regarding Emma's absence." And the third, from 2:30 p.m. "Michael, this is Carol again. We've tried reaching your emergency contacts with no success. If we don't hear from you within the hour, we'll need to follow protocol and contact authorities. Please call immediately." Michael's mind refused to process what was happening. Where was Emma? He had dropped her off, hadn't he? He always dropped her off, didn't he? The memory hit him like a physical blow. The pre-meeting call, The investor concerns, the rush to the office. He hadn't stopped at the daycare. Can you feel that? That moment when your entire world shifts on its axis, when the ground beneath your feet gives way. What happened next was a blur of panic. Michael ran from the restaurant, nearly colliding with servers and patrons. He sprinted across the parking lot to his car, fumbling with his keys, his hands shaking so violently he could barely press the unlock button. And there she was, Emma, slumped in her car seat, her skin a terrifying shade of red, completely motionless. "No, no, no, no!" Michael screamed, ripping open the door. The heat that escaped was suffocating. He unbuckled her, his fingers clumsy with terror, and pulled her limp body from the seat. She was hot to the touch, too hot. Her lips were blue. "Help!" he screamed into the parking garage. "Somebody help me!" But the level was empty. Michael laid Emma on the concrete, trying to remember his CPR training from years ago. He placed his fingers on her neck, searching desperately for a pulse. Nothing. He began chest compressions, tears blinding him, when he heard footsteps running toward him. "Sir, stop, let me." A woman dropped to her knees beside them. She wore scrubs under her open jacket. Dr. Leanne Chen, according to her ID badge. Off duty, but thank God, present. "I'm calling 911, she said calmly, taking over the compressions with practiced precision. "What's her name?" "Emma," Michael choked out. "She's 3. I left her. I forgot." Dr. Chen's eyes met his briefly without judgment. "Talk to her, Michael. Let her hear your voice while I work." The ambulance arrived within minutes, though to Michael, it felt like hours. The paramedics moved with urgent efficiency, attaching monitors, starting an IV, placing an oxygen mask over Emma's tiny face. "Pulse is weak, but present," one called out. "Core temp 105.8. Michael tried to climb into the ambulance with them, but a police officer held him back. "Sir, I need you to come with me instead," he said, his expression grave. "But she's my daughter, and we'll get you to the hospital," the officer said. "But right now, I need to ask you some questions." The threshold between Michael's ordinary world and what would become his new reality was crossed in that moment, standing in the parking garage, watching the ambulance drive away with his daughter inside. Dr. Chen touched his arm. "I'll go with her," she promised. "I'll stay with her until you can get there." The police interview was excruciating. Michael answered through tears, explaining about the presentation, the distraction, the complete and utter failure of his memory. The officers were professional but cold, taking detailed notes, exchanging glances that Michael couldn't interpret. "Am I being arrested?" he finally asked. "Not at this moment," the lead officer replied carefully. "But this is an ongoing investigation. Child endangerment is a serious offense, Mr. Bennett." At the hospital, Michael was initially prevented from seeing Emma. She had been rushed to the pediatric ICU, where doctors were fighting to lower her dangerously high body temperature and address the multiple organ damage caused by hours in the sweltering car. The waiting room became Michael's prison. His mother arrived, her face pale with shock. She didn't speak, just held him as he sobbed. His boss called, confused by his sudden departure from the celebration. When Michael explained, the line went silent for a long moment. "Take all the time you need," his boss finally said. "We're here for you." But not everyone would be so understanding. As news of the incident spread, local media picked up the story. "Father forgets child in car during heat wave," screamed the headlines. Social media exploded with condemnation. What kind of monster forgets their own child? He should be charged with attempted murder. Someone take that poor baby away from him. Even at the hospital, Michael felt the weight of judgment. Nurses whispered as he passed. Other parents in the waiting room pulled their children closer. Only Dr. Chen, who had kept her promise and stayed with Emma until Michael was allowed in, offered unwavering support. "I've seen this before," she told him quietly. "It can happen to anyone. Good parents, loving parents. The human brain is fallible, especially under stress and exhaustion." But the worst test came from within. Michael couldn't forgive himself. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emma's lifeless body in that car seat. He hadn't just failed as a father, he had nearly killed his child. Have you ever wondered how you would survive if the unthinkable happened? If you became both victim and villain in your own story? On the third day, Emma's condition stabilized enough for her to be moved out of intensive care. Though still unconscious, her vital signs were improving. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but warned of potential long-term neurological damage. Michael hadn't left the hospital. He slept in the uncomfortable chair beside Emma's bed, holding her small hand, whispering apologies and promises. It was on this day that Child Protective Services arrived. A stern-faced woman named Ms. Watkins explained that due to the nature of the incident, Emma would be placed with Michael's mother temporarily upon discharge, pending further investigation and potentially a court hearing. "You won't be allowed unsupervised contact with your daughter," Ms. Watkins explained, her voice clinically detached. The words hit Michael like physical blows. Not see Emma, not take care of her. But the crushing reality was that he had lost the right to protest. He had proven himself untrustworthy in the most fundamental way. That evening, a detective returned to take a more detailed statement. The questions were probing, skeptical. Had you been drinking the night before? Were you taking any medications? Had you ever forgotten Emma before? And then the hardest question of all. Mr. Bennett, did you leave your daughter in the car intentionally? How do you prove that your greatest failure was an accident and not something more sinister? How do you fight against suspicions when you've already condemned yourself? On the fifth day, Emma opened her eyes. Michael was dozing in the chair when a small sound woke him. He looked up to see his daughter watching him, confusion in her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice raspy from the breathing tube that had been removed the day before. He moved to her side, tears streaming down his face. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Before he could say more, a nurse entered, saw that Emma was awake, and quickly asked Michael to step outside while the doctor was called. In the hallway, he collapsed against the wall, overwhelmed by relief. She was awake. She knew him. Whatever happened next, legal consequences, public judgment, none of it mattered, as long as Emma recovered. The neurologist's examination showed promising results. Emma's basic functions seemed intact. She recognized people, could follow simple commands, and showed appropriate emotional responses. Further testing would be needed, but the initial signs suggested she might make a full recovery. "She's a fighter," the doctor told Michael, "but she's not out of the woods yet. The next few days will be critical." That night, as Michael sat beside Emma's sleeping form, Dr. Chen stopped by after her shift. "I've been doing some research," she said, handing him a folder. "These are studies on what they call forgotten baby syndrome. It's happened to hundreds of parents, doctors, lawyers, teachers, people who would never intentionally harm their children. The brain's memory system malfunctions, especially when routines are disrupted." Michael leafed through the papers, reading horrifying accounts that mirrored his own experience. Parents who had lived exemplary lives, who adored their children, yet made the same devastating mistake. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. "Because 12 years ago, I almost became one of these statistics," she finally said. "My son was 6 months old. I was doing my residency, running on almost no sleep. I got halfway to the hospital before I realized he was still in his car seat." She met Michael's stunned gaze. "The difference between me and you isn't moral character or love for our children. It's just luck." As Emma continued to improve, the legal situation evolved. The detective, influenced partly by Dr. Chen's research and testimony, recommended charges be reduced from felony child endangerment to misdemeanor negligence. Michael's lawyer negotiated a plea deal, probation, parenting classes, and community service, speaking about car safety. Most importantly, the agreement would allow him to regain custody of Emma after completing a supervised reunification program. "It's the best outcome we could hope for," his lawyer explained. "The prosecutor recognizes this wasn't intentional." But the true reward came in small moments with Emma. Her first smile since the incident. The day she asked when they could go home. The afternoon she fell asleep against his chest, trusting him completely despite everything. The media narrative began to shift too. A prominent child psychologist wrote an op-ed about the science behind memory failures and the need for technological solutions rather than punishment. Other parents came forward with their own near misses, creating a more nuanced conversation. 10 days after the incident, Emma was discharged into her grandmother's care. Michael moved into his mother's spare bedroom to be near his daughter, though always under supervision as required. "She doesn't remember much," his mother told him one evening. "That's a blessing." But Michael knew he would remember enough for both of them. The journey toward redemption was neither quick nor easy. Michael attended therapy twice weekly, working through his guilt and trauma. He took parenting classes where he was often met with whispers and stares. He installed multiple car seat alarms and developed a check-in system with both the daycare and his mother. 3 months after the incident, at Emma's follow-up appointment, they received wonderful news. All her tests showed normal brain function. No permanent damage had been detected. "She's one of the lucky ones," her doctor said. "Many children in similar situations don't survive, or survive with significant impairments." Michael knew this all too well by now. His community service had brought him into contact with other families affected by vehicular heat stroke, some who had lost children, others whose children lived with permanent disabilities. "How do you live with it?" Michael asked him after the meeting. Anthony's eyes were tired but kind. "You never fully do, but eventually you learn to use your pain to help others. That's the only way forward I've found." 1 year after the incident, Michael stood before an audience of car manufacturers, safety advocates, and legislators. Emma, now 4, sat in the front row beside her grandmother, coloring in a book, healthy and thriving. "My name is Michael Bennett," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "1 year ago, I nearly killed my daughter." He told their story without excuses, acknowledged his failure, and then shared what he had learned about the brain's vulnerability to memory lapses, especially under stress and with disrupted routines. "Technology exists that could prevent these tragedies," he continued, displaying prototypes he and a team of engineers had developed, affordable sensors that could detect a child's presence and alert parents, car systems that would recognize unusual behavior patterns. "No parent wakes up planning to leave their child in a car," he said, "but it happens with devastating frequency. We can blame, punish, and ostracize those parents, or we can accept human fallibility and engineer solutions." The speech received a standing ovation. 3 major car manufacturers approached him afterward about implementing his designs. A senator promised to champion legislation requiring standard safety features in all new vehicles. Dr. Chen, who had become a close friend and advocate, smiled at him from across the room. She had helped him channel his guilt into purpose, showing him that while he couldn't change the past, he could reshape the future. 2 years after that terrible Tuesday in July, Michael and Emma stood in a manufacturing plant, watching as the first cars equipped with the Emma Alert system rolled off the assembly line. The technology, affordable sensors coupled with smartphone alerts, had become mandatory in all new vehicles nationwide. Emma, now 5, and with no lasting effects from her ordeal, looked up at her father. Those are named after me." "Yes, sweetheart," Michael said, lifting her into his arms. "Because of you, other children will be safe." That evening, as Michael tucked Emma into bed in their new home, where they now lived without supervision, his legal obligations fulfilled, she asked the question he had been dreading. "Daddy, why did you leave me in the car that day?" Michael took a deep breath. He and his therapist had prepared for this moment. "I made a terrible mistake," he said simply. "My brain wasn't working right, and I forgot you were there. It was the worst thing I've ever done, and I'm so sorry it happened." Emma considered this. "But now you help other daddies not forget their kids. That's right?" She nodded, satisfied with this explanation. "That's good." Later, as Michael sat on his porch watching the stars, he reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. The pain hadn't disappeared. It never would. But it had transformed into something useful, something that had already saved lives according to preliminary data. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen. "Just heard about the Emma alert, saving a baby in Arizona today. First documented save. Thought you'd want to know." Michael closed his eyes, tears of gratitude flowing freely. One mistake had nearly destroyed everything he loved. But from that mistake had grown a mission that would protect countless families from similar tragedy. Sometimes, he had learned, our greatest failures can lead to our most meaningful contributions. And sometimes, forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, is the most heroic journey of all. What mistake in your life could become a mission? What pain could become purpose? If this story moved you, please subscribe for more content that explores the complexity of human experience. And remember, compassion, rather than judgment, might be what we all need most in our moments of failure. Thank you for listening.